สำหรับการบรรยายในหัวข้อต่อไปนะคะจะเป็นหัวข้อที่มีชื่อว่า Combat Social Engineering Fraud in Evolving Digital Environment ค่ะซึ่งปัจจุบันนะคะภัยคุกคามทาง Social Engineering เนี่ยสามารถพบได้มากขึ้นการที่เรารู้เท่าทันก็จะเป็นประโยชน์ต่อการรับมือนะคะและวันนี้ค่ะทางเรานะคะก็ได้รับเกียรติจากบริษัท MasterCard ค่ะซึ่งเป็นบริษัทชั้นนำทางด้านการเงินของโลกนะคะขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญมิสเตอร์มาร์ค บอมเล่ค่ะ So our next topic I would like to say that we are honored by MasterCard, the world leading finance company in global payment and digital. And the guest will share the topic of combat social engineering fraud in evolving digital environment. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Mark Bromley.
Hi, everybody. Okay, thank you very much, NCSA. Thank you very much for the invitation for MasterCard and myself to talk to you today about the topic of social engineering and what MasterCard is trying to do in this particular space. So I look forward to the presentation and walking you through some of our slides and sharing with you some information, and look forward to any questions you may have. So with that, we can start the presentation, please. Okay, I'll share my screen. Please bear with me. Okay. I hope everyone can see my screen. Please tell me, NCSA, if that is not the case. So today we're talking about data-driven approach to social engineering fraud and what MasterCard is trying to do in this particular space. So as the digital economy has grown, and as we've seen more sophisticated cyber attacks targeting individuals and more businesses, the threat of cybercrime and in particular social engineering is becoming more prevalent and more of an issue, not just for individuals, but for companies and organizations. We've seen things such as botnets, ransomware, and social engineering fraud as some examples of what is happening in this particular space. And to give you some clarity on what we mean by these, social engineering fraud is where misleading messages by email or maybe phone or other channels will cause individuals or customers or consumers, internet users, to provide personal information without knowing that actually it's not for the right reasons, malicious websites or malicious payloads, and downloading those and actually then being compromised from a data perspective. Ransomware is where malware that encrypts data on a local machine and then demands a ransom to unlock it. So we're seeing some cases now where big companies are being targeted through ransomware and being asked to pay high amounts of money to the cyber criminals in order for that data not to be shared or leaked out. And botnets, these are sophisticated devices where cyber criminals will infect malware, compromise the internal command centers of the data centers or the internal infrastructure, and they'll use these devices then to send out scam and fraudulent emails to the customers or the consumers. These are just some examples of what we're seeing happening today in the marketplace. And here's some names of some companies, some large global companies, as well as some companies which should be more familiar to our Thailand audience, Centara Hotels, a luxury Thailand hotel chain, which only in October of this year had data breach and customer information, personal information, emails, mobile phone numbers, contact details. That information was taken by the cyber criminals, and Centara Hotels were made aware of the breach and were able to stop further data being taken away. However, there was a risk and a concern that customer data, which had already been taken away, was being used by the criminals through phishing, where they pretend to call you up or email you to ask for more detail or information on behalf of the hotel for them to be able to access more of your accounts or other information areas. So Centara being a very close example to Thailand, as well as Bangkok Airways, which was back in August. Again, there was a data breach with Bangkok Airways, and the criminals were able to take out personal information on consumers who were booking or had booked flights through Bangkok Airways. And again, the risk was the criminals were contacting the individuals, asking them for more information on their bank details or their personal information. So these two examples talk to Thailand, but we have also LinkedIn, we also have Toyota. These are other global companies who have also had data breaches and social engineering concerns and issues where the customers have been contacted through the scam through email or phone calls to provide information to the cyber criminals. And often it's very believable when you receive this type of request, phone call or email, to believe it is actually from the hotel or from the airline or from your social media account. So we have to be more careful of this type of risk. The threat landscape. So what are we seeing and what is the size of the problem? 22 billion records were exposed in 2020. That is a lot of information which was acquired by these sophisticated cyber criminals. $56 billion was lost to identity fraud in 2020. The financial impact to not just the large organizations or the institutions, but also to the individuals can be significant. So the commercial impact is also a huge risk for everybody involved. And 80% of data breaches stem from stolen information, credentials, really sophisticated attacks. So again, these numbers are very impactful and really do show that this problem around social engineering and cybercrime and the sophistication is actually becoming more and more prevalent for everybody. So some examples of social engineering, and what do we mean by social engineering? This definition is malicious activity that's accomplished through human interactions. Some of these techniques that criminals use today can be phishing by email, phishing, which is by voice, where someone calls you on your mobile phone or your landline pretending to be someone like your bank, asking you for further information. Smishing is texting. So again, criminals are starting to use the devices more. They're starting to contact us through the mobile phone, through smart devices, through our laptops. So again, text, receiving text information is also, and remote access scams. So these are some of the techniques that are being used today. And what is the problem for online businesses, and e-commerce and other institutions? The fraudsters will access customers' accounts. They will then be able to take customer information from those accounts, and that could be anything from personal information through to your banking details, your address and others. Customers may be tricked into transferring money or thinking that there's some reward at the end of it. So it's very easy for people to think that someone on the other end of the line is who they say they are, and they do provide bank details, they do provide some form of payment to the what is effectively the criminals, the ones who have created the data breach. What does this mean? Then obviously there's a financial impact. There's an impact to the individual who's transferring that money from their personal account to the criminal. There's a loss of reputation for the company. So if the company's had a data breach, and indeed there is social engineering involved, targeting the customers, the end users, then the reputation of that company is severely impacted. And the trust, which is hugely important in this day and age, the trust of the brand is also impacted. And that can be very detrimental to big businesses and small businesses. And then, of course, there's a regulatory impact, especially in the financial institutions, for the banks and for the large kind of insurance companies and the fintech, etc. The regulatory impact that this can have on you and what it means for your organization going forward, again, can create a lot of problems and a lot of issues. So just describing to you the chronology of an attack, how it unfolds, how it plays itself out. Normally, step one, the fraudster will obtain user information on the dark web. Cyber criminals and cybercrime. Today, it's actually possible to procure and buy customer information from these cyber criminals. So that's normally where they start. They get our information. They normally are able to pay for that and find that information. They'll call or email or text the victim and pretend to be a government official, as an example here. The fraudster will convince that victim to transfer money, because if you think the government is calling you and they're asking you for you to pay outstanding tax bill or some other form of payment, then most of us would probably go ahead and not question the government and probably go ahead with that transfer. Now, the victim will then have the information from the consumer and log into their bank account, and the fraudster can give the transfer details to the victim, and the fraudster will then be able to access the funds. So we're seeing more instances where, again, people are transferring their money to these criminals, not always knowing and not maybe fully understanding what really is happening until maybe it's too late, until then you check your bank account, or then you actually realize that the individual or the company you thought it was is actually someone else. So what is needed? What are we trying to do? What is MasterCard trying to do in particular to mitigate for this threat? A general approach is needed as we become more digital, as we become more interconnected, as we become more commonplace of buying and procuring through e-commerce and online, etc. There's a need for us to understand that risk and mitigate for that. What it means is we're looking for a more intelligent, data-driven approach to fight cybercrime at an ecosystem level. So how do we stay a step ahead of these fraudsters? How do we stay ahead of these cybercriminals who are becoming more sophisticated in themselves? Digital commerce is continuing to grow. Over 2 billion people today in the world use e-commerce as a means of buying goods and services. Fraudsters are starting to move online. Fraudsters are understanding that e-commerce and the digital interaction is a key area and opportunity for them. Businesses are feeling the impact. Again, as we move more online, there's more points of risk, there's more points of failure that can happen. And again, businesses and companies need to protect themselves and need to try to find ways to become more resilient. Traditional security measures are not enough. We need to evolve, consistently look at how do we get better? How do we fight these cyber criminals with the technology and the products that we have? MasterCard is trying to help its network and the general consensus of all of the merchants and retailers and consumers and institutions to be more resilient, to have better access to products and services that can protect their own organizations. And cyber criminals are using data-driven approaches to orchestrate cybercrime. So cyber criminals themselves are starting to take this approach. And consumers are feeling the impact. The examples we had of Centara, of Bangkok Airlines, of LinkedIn, of Toyota, this is impacting thousands and hundreds of thousands of individuals. And so therefore the wider impact, and maybe there are people on this presentation who have personally been impacted or been at least a victim of social engineering and phishing or vishing or whatever it might be. So being able to inform and educate and help consumers to understand what that risk and threat is and how they can prepare for that is what we're trying to do, and something MasterCard is actively trying to do as part of our own cyber strategy. So technology, and MasterCard's a technology company, can help to combat social engineering fraud, moving away from just a static user ID password. We all have many, many passwords, too many passwords, trying to move away from that just one singular entry point and a generic password, or password that is very weak because it's our date of birth or it's our partner's name or it's our pet's name. We need to be better at how we can help to do that. And every online interaction generally involves, authentication. So how do we determine it's us? There's something which is the password. There's something that we have, which could be a one-time PIN, which maybe we use through our banking application. And more importantly, in this day and age, more biometric technology being used, like thumbprints, to activate your phone, to verify yourself when you're making a payment. So these are all examples of what is happening today. And what we're trying to do is adopt a continuous behavioral authentication. We're trying to make sure that that authentication is happening not just at the very beginning of logging in, but through the various user journey or the customer journey through, and the evolution of how do we authenticate behavioral analysts. So how does a user behave on its application? How does it interact? How fast do they type? As an example, how quickly do they jump from page to page? Passive biometrics, so the movements of a user. Again, how do we hold our device? Is there a standard way that we tend to hold our phone? Horizontally, vertically, up or down, sideways, left or right? So being able to determine that for the user. And how do we interact and move our mouse? How do we use that device? And again, understanding that type of information is how we would like to help to authenticate and understand who that user is. And device fingerprint, so device intelligence, so recognizing that the device that is being used to log into the application, so device ID, is it your actual phone or your device? And the fingerprint user identification is not sufficient. So again, it's about validating and having stronger user authentication. And we share that threat intelligence. So how do we do that? Collecting the data points, understanding all of the interactions, and using that information to have data and analytics behind it. So we can help to aggregate, and we can help to create a score, and we can help us determine if that individual is actually who they are or say they are. And it's not a sophisticated bot, or it's not a human that's pretending to be one of us, using our device and trying to access that information. So we can see this kind of flow, this multi-layered approach of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to be more resilient, and how we're trying to take a more holistic approach to security and fighting kind of the criminals who are trying to authenticate or pretend to be someone else in this case. I'll quickly just mention and talk a little bit about MasterCard and NuData in particular. NuData is a MasterCard company that was acquired in 2018, and NuData has behavioral biometrics, a product that MasterCard is using and is out there in the market today. But just to give you a quick overview of MasterCard, which is a technology company headquartered in the United States, over 2,500 customers worldwide, operating in over 120 countries, and over 20 years of payment and innovation expertise. MasterCard is a technology company that is also trying to be the safest payments company, and we're trying to offer products and services particularly around cyber, new data being one of those key examples, which we'll talk to in more detail in a second, but MasterCard's overall strategy to be the safest payments company, and a lot of acquisitions that we've made are around how do we create that digital identity and identity solutions, resiliency, and do so in a frictionless way. So it doesn't impact on the end user or the consumer. These products are designed to be frictionless. The new data has in its own ecosystem 650 billion data points which are monitored yearly, and those data points are all based on previous transactions that the individuals have made, and those data points are then aggregated and a risk score is determined to help determine if that is who the individual is, who they say they are, or indeed are they human or are they maybe a sophisticated bot. 100 million accounts are protected monthly through new data, and a 99% accuracy score in mitigating high risk. Some awards which validate the product and show that, best in class in terms of the biometric and the overall kind of risk and fraud solution that New Data and New Detect, which is the flagship product, is trying to serve for. And the recognition in the industry is hugely important because it validates that the product and what we're trying to do is indeed recognized, which is always a nice thing. Winning some of these awards has helped the team to really, focus to continue to be best in class and to deliver, a product that we believe, can benefit anyone. We talked about continuous digital protection. So we like to deliver an end-to-end authentication protection without disrupting the user experience. Hugely important. We do not want it to be something which the end consumer finds to be a pain point, or they're having to authenticate themselves too many times without spoiling that experience for them. So making sure we have a solution that is frictionless and allows the end consumer to still be verified and to go through their interaction, but without harming the user experience that they have. We talked about social engineering. There are other forms of risk out there, account takeover, human farm attacks, where you have rooms of individuals who have the consumer or customer information, and they are in these huge scale attacks trying to pretend to be other people, and they're trying to access our information. They're trying to pretend to be someone else. Money transfer fraud, sophisticated bots. So sophisticated bots who are trying to pretend to be humans. Again, there are others, human-looking attacks, device spoofing. So New Detect and New Data tries to solve for all of these types of instances, and these could be at different stages. These could be at account logging, it could be at browsing, it could be access or resetting passwords. So the product and New Data and New Detect is trying to serve for all of these and provide a continuous validation and protection for the user. And how do we do this? So we make digital behavior personal. We collect information from the end users who are using their devices, and with that we are able then to create, through our trust consortium and those 650 billion data points, aggregated scores to identify, is this a high risk, or is this a medium, or is this a low risk. So we talked a little bit earlier about device intelligence, the location of the device, the type of device, behavioral analytics. So again, how does that user interact with their device, and the type of information that they're performing. Biometrics, how do they integrate with the mouse, how do they move their fingers, how do they interact with that device. And all of this information is collected, and it's formed and part of our trust consortium, which is collected across all of our New Data customers and clients. And with that trust consortium, we are then able, through machine learning, to be able to provide indicators and signals back to the client to say that we believe that this interaction may not be from who they say they are, or it may not be from a human. It may be from one of these sophisticated bots. So again, these kind of multi-layers that we have, all of them, all the information behind that is then connected, and our trust consortium then is able to help to determine what we believe to be that score or that risk, and then flag that to our client or customer. So new detect identifies suspicious user patterns to detect fraud. So maybe at account creation or the login page, if you see the device on the left-hand side, so when any of us are going in to create a new account, maybe for new utilities or a new bank account, or simply logging in, what are the risks? We can have, again, these bots performing automated scripts, human fraud, trying to assess a compromised account where they've been able to get information. So how do we block that automation? How do we stop that? How do we analyze the account history to identify unusual activity? Some of those examples could be time spent. How much time do we spend logging in? How much time do we spend kind of on some of these web pages or these browsers? And suspicious windows could be, is a user moving in between applications unnaturally? Do they have 20, 30 applications up at one time, and they're trying to pull information from various places? So signals through this kind of suspicious behavior is something which new detect is able to identify. We're able then determine if it could be a high risk or low risk or medium risk interaction. And what are the risks to institutions? We talked about this before. Fraudsters will add themselves as beneficiaries, and users are being social engineered to add a fraudulent beneficiary without maybe them knowing. So again, that could impact or affect transferring of money from account to account, or someone pretending to be someone else, and you're sending them money thinking that it's actually someone else or a business or company you trust, and in fact it's indeed a cyber criminal at the end of that. So leverage behavioral biometrics to identify any anomalies that may be happening. So that could be the device information, again, the mouse distance, suspicious typing, how do users interact with their device? Are they typing extremely slowly? Are they typing incredibly fast? Is that different to how they behave or would interact with their device normally? So comparing these inputs can help us to create kind of patterns of fraud, identify those patterns of fraud, and then through that, again, through our data points, being able to calculate and provide a score and provide a level of information back where we can say, we don't think this is who they say they are, or indeed we think this could be some suspicious activity being performed by someone else, either human or these sophisticated bots. So again, new detect is able to determine this, and the product is using that passive biometrics and behavioral interaction to determine all of this. And just some use case examples. So new detect, which is the product that we've been talking about. MasterCard is working with a government, a very established government entity in Southeast Asia, and we're working to develop a national digital identity ecosystem. And through this platform, 4 million users are now using a single identity platform, and that number will be scaling and growing over time, and as we get more people through the platform and using the application. And in this case, new detect will authenticate the user's identity, and we will alert the platform of any high risk or unusual activity through some of those signals and through some of those means and ways that we have discussed before. And again, this could be through forgetting your ID or resetting your password, a third-party login page, login factors through a QR code, username, password, SMS, facial recognition, and web page and mobile app integration. These are all things that we are trying to, in this particular use case, serve for and help identify and protect. So here's just some contact details. My email address is here, as well as Anjum, who is my colleague. We are both based in Singapore. And if obviously if there's any questions for us, we're very welcome, very happy to answer the questions. And if there's any follow-ups outside or after this event, please reach out to me. If there's any more information we can share with you on new data and new detect, or anything on the topic of social engineering fraud that we've discussed today, please do reach out to me or Anjum or both of us, and we will gladly and very happily talk to you. And I just, before I kind of hand over to Q&A, I just want to say again, thank you to NCSA for inviting me, for letting MasterCard have a slot here and discuss a very important topic of social engineering, which unfortunately we're seeing more issues of in real life, affecting us all. But as I said, MasterCard and New Data are trying to serve and protect to help us not fall foul of some of these activities. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will...
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. But I believe that is not the end of MasterCard section, right?
That was the end of my...
your section. Okay, but there are some questions from the Q&A box. So will you have like a couple of minutes to answer the question first? Okay. So question number 1, does MasterCard have any activities related on blockchain now?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We have made another acquisition to another company in our cyber space that is looking at the blockchain and is looking to try to serve for suspicious or fraud-related activity through the blockchain. As we know, blockchain and crypto is becoming more prevalent for all of us, and MasterCard is trying, as part of our company strategy, to adopt and accept crypto as payment, as forms of payment. So we do have our own products and services, and we do have some acquisitions that are, again, trying to allow for how does MasterCard accept crypto and leverage the blockchain, but equally how do we protect clients and customers who may be also wanting or in the blockchain and using crypto for their own purposes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. And also there's another question. It's from the Q&A box. If hackers had our face pictures, could they do anything to our MasterCard for now and future?
I honestly don't know 100%, but I do not believe that is something which we're seeing, or the facial recognition aspect of obviously how we maybe would log into our phone and our device. Again, that is something which is probably becoming more of a concern or a risk for individuals. I would say currently today, the products that we have are not necessarily serving for that type of issue, but more biometrics, so the fingerprints and the thumbprints and how we interact and use that. But the facial recognition is something which we are obviously very aware of, and we are looking to try to understand the concerning issue.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
But we don't take user photos. We don't do that. That's not what we use as part of our new data collection or technology. No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mark Bromley from MasterCard as well. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right.